I wanted to start, unsurprisingly, by talking about the Buddha. So when the Buddha, um, the Buddha gained an awakening, as we know, beneath the Bodhi tree in the middle of his life when he was 35. And according to the accounts that we have, he spent the rest of his life, the remaining 45 years of his life, which is quite a long time actually, walking around northeastern India. And most of the accounts that we have are the accounts of his encounters with people. So he encountered all kinds of people in a lot of different ways. Sometimes he'd encounter individuals. Sometimes he'd encounter whole groups of people. Sometimes he'd give like what we might call a Dharma talk. Other times he might just chance upon somebody and talk with them a while. And he also spoke with people from a whole range of different backgrounds and a whole range of different social standings, you could say. So, he spoke with kings and queens. He spoke with doctors. He spoke with outcasts. He spoke with murderers. He spoke with spiritual teachers from all the different traditions that were around at that time. So he spoke with anybody really. It appears who was interested to speak with him, which in itself is quite a significant thing. He didn't seem to be that fussy about who he spoke to. You get the impression he just spoke to whoever was interested in speaking with him. And when you read these encounters, very often, not always, but very often people are deeply impressed by the Buddha. It's clear that the Buddha's personality, the Buddha's being, as it were, just has a huge impact on them. They're almost kind of overwhelmed by the impact that the Buddha's had on them, the encounter with the Buddha and what the Buddha said to them, and even probably just that the Buddha's presence, the Buddha's gravitas as a human being. And there's what you get in the Pali scriptures. So the Pali scriptures, the Pali canon, is some of the oldest accounts we have of the Buddha's life. And often what you get is these stock phrases, or these, which is basically you get the same bit of text in different individual suttas or individual discourses that's communicating something about what's happening, communicating the significance of what's going on. And very often after the Buddha's had one of these encounters, after he's met somebody, you'll get this particular stock bit of text. So in this particular instance, the person who is speaking is a character called Subhadra. Subhadra was the last disciple of the Buddha. Subhadra met the Buddha just before the Buddha was about to pass away into parinirvana. And again, it's quite moving that even when the Buddha was literally on his deathbed, he was willing to speak to somebody who wanted to speak with him and respond to him, his desire for freedom. So this is what Subhadra said. Then Subhadra the Wanderer said, "It's amazing, Lord. It's magnificent. Just as if he were to place upright what was overturned, to reveal what was hidden, to point out the way to one who was lost, or to carry a lamp into the dark so that those with eyes could see forms. In the same way has the Blessed One, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma and to the Sangha. Let me obtain the going forth in the Blessed One's presence. Let me obtain admission." So that last little bit is basically Subhadra becoming a bhikkhu, becoming a formal disciple of the Buddha and a member of the Buddha's community of renunciants. So that's the stock phrase that you get, and I just wanted to talk about that a little while because it says quite a lot about what people's response to the Buddha is. So the first part of that is Subhadra and numerous others of the Buddha's disciples just say, "It's amazing, Lord, it's magnificent." So again, you get this communication of people's awe, of wonder, of astonishment, of amazement. It's like something, they've encountered something beyond their ken, something completely new, something completely fresh, something completely overwhelming, something true, something solid, something reliable. And they just say, "Wow, it's amazing, Lord, it's magnificent." And I don't know, sometimes if you've had the experience of going to, let's say you go to a film and it really blows you away, as we say, or you go to a concert, or you hear a Dharma talk, or go on a retreat, or you see something very beautiful, I don't know, like the Grand Canyon, or you see a huge ancient tree. And quite often at the beginning, you can't say what it is that you've encountered. You can't describe your experience. It's impossible to say anything that does justice to it. So you just end up saying, "Wow." And sometimes, if you've had an experience like that, particularly if you're with somebody else, it can take a little while before you can start to talk. If you've both been, particularly struck. And it seems like that's what's happened here with people's encounter with the Buddha, is they're just not, initially people are just awestruck, they're dumbstruck even. So that all I can say is, "Wow, it's amazing, it's magnificent, it's wonderful." And then what happens is, rather than talking about it philosophically or technically, what these people do is they offer 4 comparisons. So they're like images or similes or metaphors. So in a way, what happens is people speak the language of poetry in order to express the impact that the Buddhas have had on them. So there's 4 of these comparisons, and I wanted to talk a little bit about each of them in turn. So the first one is, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned. Just as if he were to place upright what was overturned. So you get the impression of maybe like a great... well, actually, the image that came to me when I was thinking about this was, recently I watched a film about the bombing of Dresden. So Dresden is a German city in the capital of Saxony, which is one of the provinces of Germany. And in the Second World War, I think it was in early 1945, the RAF and I think the American Air Force basically completely flattened it, killing more than 100,000 people. It was one of those horribly devastating events. And interestingly, the day afterwards, Dresden was rebuilt. And I imagine if you were a resident of Dresden who survived that bombing, and to see your city come back into existence must have been really quite something. To see the cathedrals and the churches and the civic buildings, and it was Dresden is particularly beautiful, I gather. Ancient architecture and so on. So I can imagine if you survived that devastation, and to see it come back into existence must have been quite something to see. So it's as if people's encounter with the Buddha is like that something has been put right that's profoundly wrong. And I was thinking a little bit closer to home, just with the General Post Office on O'Connell Street. So we all know that, in the Easter Rising, which well, it took place in Easter, what is it, 105 years ago. That was the capital, or the headquarters of the provisional Irish government for a short period, and so it has that kind of mythical status in this country. And after it was it was shelled and it burnt down. And for quite a while, I'm not sure exactly how long, I didn't get a chance to look it up, but for more than a decade, I believe, it was just lying there, ruined. And at a certain point, it was restored. And again, it must have been quite something to, have lived through that whole period, the revolutionary period, and then to see the General Post Office come back into existence, come back into its full beauty, and to be restored to its wholeness. So that's what I think, that's something of akin to what these people encounter when they encounter the Buddha, something that has been knocked over, destroyed, to come back into its full wholeness, its completeness. So it's quite a strong image, just as if he were to place upright what was overturned. And the second comparison is to reveal what was hidden, just as if the Buddha was to reveal what was hidden. And the immediate image that came to me when I was thinking about this was getting glasses for the first time. I don't know how many of you have had this experience, but I suspect that I've actually been short-sighted for most of my life, even when I was a small child. Not terribly short-sighted. I could see the blackboard at school and so on. So it never caused me. It wasn't bad enough that I needed glasses. But I remember when I was about 16, we used to live on a hill in Wellington, over the city, and I remember the first time putting on my glasses and just looking out over the city. And rather than these being these blobs of light, there's little pinpoints of light, which were all the street lights and the lights of the city. And it was so beautiful. It was really quite magical, actually, just to have that experience. So it's as if when the Buddha communicates, he reveals something that was there all along, but which was invisible, which wasn't able to be seen. So he was to reveal something that was hidden. So people have that kind of experience. I couldn't help but thinking as well. This is slightly odd, but about buried treasure. When I was a kid, I was just like thrilled by the idea of buried treasure. And it brought to mind this movie called The Goonies from 1985. Some of you might remember that. But these kids in this American town discover this Spanish pirate galleon sort of in a mine or something. I can't quite remember, but it's really, really brilliant kind of film about the kind of magic of buried treasure and everything like that. So I think there's something of that in it as well, as you discover that, like, buried in your back garden, there's this casket of like gold and jewels that you didn't know was there. It reminds me as well of somebody. There's this if you go into Birmingham in the museum in the middle of Birmingham, there's the Staffordshire hoard, which is somebody actually found a hoard of Anglo-Saxon gold just in like a field in Suffolk or something like that, just with their metal detector. I think that's just magical to find something like that. Or that man who found a torque in the burren, just sort of under a rock or something when he was hunting rabbits. To me, that would be like the best thing that could happen in samsara would be for something like that to happen, to find an ancient artifact of that kind. Anyway, I better move on before I get carried away, if I haven't got carried away already. And then the third is to point out the way to one who is lost. Now, I think this image is particularly strong when you think back to what it would have been like living in India 2,500 years ago. Now, India now is one of the most populous countries in the world, if not the most populous country, actually. I think there's more people living in India than any other country. But then it would have been vast tracts of wilderness with little bits of human habitation. So you can imagine if you were going from one village to another village or crossing a mountain range, knowing your way would have been a matter literally of life and death. If you got lost, you might just die. You might be eaten by wild animals, literally. You might starve. You might die of thirst. So you can imagine that getting lost in that situation was a deeply dangerous, frightening experience. And you can imagine if you were lost on one of the byways of ancient India and you came across somebody who knew the way, and you spoke with that person and they told you the way to get to the place where you wanted to go, it'd be a profound relief. So that's what the Buddha's pointing here. That's what this comparison is pointing to, the profound relief of being lost and knowing that you're lost, and then somebody actually telling you how to find where you want to go. Now, again, I was just thinking about this, and what came to me was when I was a kid, uh, my father used to take us, what we call it tramping in New Zealand. It means hiking in the hills. And again, when you go, particularly into the Southern Alps, so the South Islands of New Zealand, if you've seen the Lord of the Rings films, you'll have some sense of this. But there's right down the middle of the South Island, which is like a sort of a long rectangle. There's this mountain range. It's rather unimaginatively called the Southern Alps, but if you when you go into the Southern Alps, you are in an area where again is tiny little pockets of human habitation, but most of it is just wilderness. Forests that have never been felled. Places you can sometimes you walk on a bit of land and you think, and if you go off the track, you kind of think to yourself, maybe no one's ever stood here before on this particular bit of land. It's very, very different from walking around the country in Ireland, which feels ancient and thoroughly lived on. New Zealand is very, very different in that respect. And I remember walking. You can. There's whole kind of grades of tramps you can do. You can do like kind of easy, or you can do like super difficult, where you basically need a map and a compass and there's no tracks. And on this particular occasion, for some reason, we were doing one of these kinds of walks right in the middle of the Southern Alps in a place called Arthur's Pass. And we were walking up a river valley and there was no track. You were basically walking up a stream and these huge bushes, and it started to rain, and a mist came down, and we had to, at a certain point, we had to take a left and go leave the river valley and go over a pass to get into another river valley. And I remember sort of realizing that it was really, really important that we got that right, because if you go over the wrong path, you could end up falling over a precipice, or you could get completely lost and lose the daylight, and you could. It was really cold. I think actually, with hindsight, I think I might have started to get hypothermia. I started to go slightly doolally and not carey about it. But anyway, the point is that I remember my dad and my uncle looking at the map and sort of discussing like where we were and when it was time to turn left, and it really mattered, if you see what I mean. So that's what the image means, is that you point out the way to one who was lost, because finding a way is a life or death situation. The fourth image is to carry a lamp into the dark so that those with eyes could see forms. And of course, the Buddha is very strongly associated with the sun. The sun is, obviously is the being who brings light into the darkness of night. The Buddha is actually known as Aditya Bandhu, which means the kinsman of the sun. And again, some of you will be familiar with Pingia's praises. Pingia was a disciple of the Buddha, and he talks about encountering the Buddha, and he says, up till now, before I heard Gautama's teaching, people had always told me this. This is how it has always been, and this is how it will always be. Only the constant refrain of tradition, a breeding ground for speculation. This prince, this beam of light, Gautama, was the only one who dissolved the darkness. Again, there's another translation where the Pingia says in this translation, seated alone is the dispeller of darkness, the bright one, the light maker. And the light maker, Prabhakara, is actually one of the names of the sun in Indian legend. And the Dhamma Chakra, the eight-spoked wheel of the Dhamma, is a solar symbol as well. It's said that Surya, the sun god, carries the sun across the sky, and he rides a chariot of one wheel, and that's where the image of the Dhamma Chakra comes from that kind of ancient Indian legend. So again, I think, in terms of something a little bit closer to home, you can imagine the ancient people, marveling and wondering and feeling profoundly grateful for the return of the light at the solstice. There's all these monuments to that particular event. But that sense of awe that the light has come. Light has come because, as human beings, sight is our primary sense, sight and hearing. So not to be able to see and then to be able to see is just a profoundly basic event for our existence. To grow food, to see, etc., etc. So these are all just comparisons about how people feel when they encounter the Buddha. So they feel that something that is overturned has been placed upright, that something that was hidden has been revealed, that the way has been pointed out to one who was lost, and that a lamp has been carried into a dark place so that vision can happen, seeing can happen. So I just wanted to pause at this point, and then, like we might have had that kind of something akin to this in our encounter with the three jewels. Some kind of response, some kind of feeling, some kind of inkling, some kind of glimpse. And I just wanted to ask the question, really, is that how can we respond to the Buddha at all? How is it that we can respond to the Buddha? So according to the Buddha's teaching, we are kind of encased in ignorance. Ignorance, a profound sort of darkness. We just don't really see what's going on. That's our state as unenlightened human beings, as one of ignorance. Like we really don't understand. That's the way the Buddha sort of talks. We really don't get it profoundly, and we kind of don't want to get it. We don't want to know. We ignore. We're in a state of ignorance or darkness. So how is it that we can respond to the Buddha at all? How can an ignorant, unenlightened being respond to an awakened, enlightened being? It's kind of amazing this can happen, but it does happen. And it happens because we do have this faculty which is called Shraddha. Shraddha means something like to place the heart upon. It's very often translated as faith, which I think is really good, is once we kind of don't get tangled up with the connotations from other religious traditions. And Sangharakshita, who I'll talk about a little bit in a moment, he says that faith is the ultimate in us, responding to what is ultimate in the universe. Faith is the ultimate in us, responding to what is ultimate in the universe. So it's as if there's something in us, there's something ultimate in us, and that's how we can respond, because there's something about us which has an affinity with the Buddha, with the awakened one. And that's really basic to us. It's basic to our human beingness. And in a way, it's a bit of a miracle, I think. It's a bit of a miracle, this. Again, Sangharakshita says, faith is innate, doubt acquired. Faith is innate, doubt acquired. So it's as if that faculty of faith is just, it's innate to us, it's intrinsic to us, it's part of our nature as human beings. Doubt is something that is laid on top of that. It's like an accretion, or as in one text, it's described as an adventitious defilement. So I think it's worth just pondering that for a bit. And I was reminded of a little bit of Shakespeare. Now this is from Hamlet. Hamlet's in a really bad way. He's quite down, very down, actually, one could say. So it kind of, I just wanted to read this. He says, what a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. So he then goes on to say that, human beings are the quintessence of dust. He's kind of a bit down on it all that after that. But I think it's worth just dwelling on just how amazing we are as human beings. I think it's particularly important because we can get a bit cynical, really. It's quite easy to get cynical when you read the news a lot. You sort of see the more venal side of human beings, but we do have these amazing faculties. So this is probably put more commonly in a more kind of down to earth way when we say, and as we do in one of our pujas, the Buddha was born as we are born. What the Buddha attained, what we too can attain. What the Buddha overcame, we too can overcome. So there's something about us which responds to the Buddha. He's made of the same stuff that we're made of. And this symbolism comes out particularly. I've got a Vadra here. So Vadra symbolizes, in a way, the connection between ignorance and awakening. So there's two ha's, as you can see. Probably better to hold it up that way. On the top, there's these 5 prongs that symbolize the 5 wisdoms. And on the bottom, there's these 5 prongs which symbolize the 5 poisons, the 5 defilements, or the 5 negative mental states. But they're connected. You can see the central shaft of the Vadra goes through the middle and joins both sides. So this symbolism is very, very important in Vajrayana Buddhism. It's where the Vajrayana gets its name from, that in a way the basis of that practice is to recognize that we have this connection with awakening with the Buddha. Even though we're ignorant, we have the faculty to transform ignorance into wisdom. So I just wanted to point that out because it's a very beautiful symbol and very expressive symbol. There's a whole other talk in there, but I'll just leave it at that for the moment. So this capacity that we have, this faculty that we have, as it's sometimes put, is something that it's quite hard to put your finger on. Sometimes when you can make comparison like these ancient disciples of the Buddha did, but it's really hard to express just what exactly it is about the 3 jewels that you're responding to, just what exactly it is that means something to you, just what exactly it is that has value. When you really get down to it, it's really hard to, maybe impossible, to express that. What you end up with is just the need, the desire, even the compulsion to act on it, to act on the basis of that response. As we say, actions speak louder than words. To actually, live from that glimpse. So we've been hearing about vision and transformation. There's a few people on this, Fiona and Lynn, amongst others, on this in this meeting, who were on a course. We just looked at the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. And that idea is that we don't just have the vision, but we live from that vision. So that's the path of transformation. And even last night, when we said those words about the mandala, and we say, may the Vadra wall of determination extend. So around the sacred spot, there's a wall of flowers, there's a wall of flames, and there's a wall of Vadras. So it's as if that Vajric connection that we have with awakening, we extend that outwards into the mandala of our life. It moves outwards and transforms all the different elements, harmonizes all the different elements of our life. So that's the path of transformation. So those are the four comparisons, some words about our response to the Buddha. And of course, what happens then in that stock phrase is that the people say, in the same way has the Blessed One, through many lines of reasoning, made the Dhamma clear. I go to the Blessed One for refuge, to the Dhamma and to the Sangha. So that's the act. The act, the response is commitment, is an action, is something that one does as an expression of that response one has had to the Buddha. That's what going for refuge means. You have a personal encounter, and you encounter something that you feel you can trust, that reveals a path that will lead you to freedom, and you commit. So that's what going for refuge to the Buddha is. Now, there's a lot more that one could say, and we'll hear some more over the course of the weekend. I just wanted to finish with one little idea, one little thought, and that is that just to recognize that for most of us, our meeting with the three jewels doesn't happen like that. We don't meet the Buddha. The Buddha hasn't been around for quite a long time. Very often what happens is that kind of experience happens when we meet somebody, we meet a Buddhist, or when we hear a Dharma teaching, particularly a Dharma teaching that's communicated by a Buddhist. So it's as if we meet a kind of a reflection of the Buddha's encounter with a disciple. We might not meet the Buddha, but we have an experience of this. And in the Vajrayana tradition that I mentioned a minute ago, they talk about the refuges, the three refuges, having three esoteric or secret counterparts. Now, when they talk about it being esoteric or secret, they don't mean that it's been deliberately hidden. So it's not esoteric in that sense, or artificially kept secret. It's secret because it's difficult to communicate. It's really difficult to communicate what we've responded to. People say things like, there's just something about that person. I remember quite a couple of friends of mine I know who got involved with Buddhism because they worked with somebody who was a Buddhist, and they just were really taken with something about the way they were. They couldn't even put their finger on it, but that led them to pursue the Dharma. I've got a couple of friends in mind who are members of our order who encountered another member of the order just at work, and they found their way into the Dharma that way. So it's in that sense that they're secret, in that sense that they're esoteric. And the three counterparts are, first of all, the guru, or the spiritual teacher, the spiritual friend. That's the counterpart to the Buddha refuge. The yidam, or the chosen meditation or deity, that's the counterpart to the Dharma refuge. And the dakini is the counterpart to the Sangha refuge. The dakini is like literally a sky dancing feminine figure of ecstatic communication, you could say. And it's interesting that in our tradition, particularly when you meet older order members, they don't talk about meeting the movement or meeting the FWBO as it was, or meeting Trueratna. They talk about meeting Bhante. But Bhante is our founder. He started Trueratna in 1967 in London. That's what we're going to be celebrating tomorrow. And very often when you talk to those earlier order members, like I said, they talk about meeting Bhante. They talk about, and that is their kind of starting point. For a lot of the later generations, we talk about meeting the movement or coming along to the center. But for those earlier generations, it was actually meeting Bhante. And last year, I did a few interviews with some of these older generation of order members. Ratnavandana and Subhuti stand out in particular. And what they both said was that Bhante saw something in them that they didn't see themselves. He was able to, and again, I heard Padma Vadra, another order member of that generation, say that that Bhante took him more seriously than he took himself. So there's something that happens in that encounter where Bhante, took them more seriously than took themselves. He was able to witness something about them, acknowledge something or affirm something. That sort of aspect, that shraddha, that a potential, you could say, and affirm that. And I had that same experience when I came along with an order member called Achala. he just kept saying, he just kept affirming that, and I needed it because I wasn't going to get it from anywhere else. And he just used to encourage me. So I used to, be going on his, I don't know, retreats or so, and I'd be a bit nervous. He's particularly kind of going for refuge retreats, ordination training retreats where people were a lot older than me. And he'd say to me, "You'll be all right, Ben." "Oh no, you're," he just kept sort of affirming my good qualities, I suppose. And so that sort of faculty of a spiritual friend, of a sort of an older brother or older sister is a bit like the vision of the Buddha's vision of the lotus flowers. That they see the potential and they draw that out. So I just wanted to finish with that aspect, which is a much more sort of personal experience that some of us will have had, or maybe will have. But all of us are on this retreat because something has been sparked off. There's been some experience of Shraddha, some experience of the ultimate in us responding to the ultimate in the universe. And in a way, I think that's the kind of essence of what encountering the Buddha means, and in a way, the initial impetus to go for refuge to the Buddha.